At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Welcome, one and all, to the annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration for the greater Oneonta area, sponsored by our chapter of the NAACP. As pastor of First United Methodist Church here on Chestnut and Church Streets in Oneonta, I'm continually gratified that our community is a place with heart. Despite the deep divisions that are in evidence across our land, I'm grateful that we can come together as people of all faiths or none in a common commitment to justice. I'm thankful for the spirit of cooperation and collaboration that has blossomed as we planned today's celebration of the 93rd birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To all who are giving of your time and talent to make this celebration so special, your words, your music, your message will energize us all to continue the work of Dr. King as we rededicate ourselves to dismantling racism and poverty throughout our wider community and the world. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream in this new year, 2022. Many long years ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I wrote one of my doctoral exams in theological ethics at the University of Chicago on the writings of Dr. King. In my research, in which I was honored to read just about everything he ever wrote, I was continually struck by the extent to which his grounding in the philosophy of personalism undergirded his commitment to civil rights for all. Sometimes known as Boston personalism, since it was most at home at Boston University, where Dr. King did his PhD. However, he became acquainted with personalism at Morehouse College while an undergraduate. As you no doubt are aware, for Dr. King, what is both unique and universal about each and every human being on the planet is that each is gifted with personality, infinitely valuable, unrepeatable, intimately connected to the Almighty, in whose image all are made. King's understanding of the infinite value of each human personality is deeply connected to his commitment to civil rights, especially the right to vote. Because each person is made in the image of God, because each person is a personality with dignity and worth, each person's contribution is critical to the common good of all. As Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia recently stated, who preaches, as you know, every Sunday from the pulpit of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Dr. King and his daddy King both preached, democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea, the idea that all of us have dignity, and so we ought to have a voice in the process, unquote. We have come together this afternoon to celebrate the dignity and to uphold each and every voice. May every note of every song and every word of every speech this afternoon inspire us to continue to protect the right to vote so that all who are eligible may vote easily and without obstruction, and so that all votes may be counted. Because you count, I count, everyone in Dr. King's vision counts. Let's never stop fighting for human dignity. Amen.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, and let it resound loud as the rolling sea. They are words from the National Negro Anthem, which is known as the National Negro Hymn. Good afternoon. My name is Lee Fisher. I'm the Oneonta Area Branch President of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. And we, the NAACP and the Human Rights Commission, would like to welcome you all to our annual Dr. Martin Luther King celebration. As we commemorate the legacy of Dr. King, who was one of our America's finest heroes, remember how passionately he fought for civil rights, equality, and justice for everyone by leading this nation to overcome evil with good and changing hearts and minds that were doing wrong, and by being on the right side of our American Constitution. Dr. King's dream was not just words. He was telling us if we want a better nation, we must put his words into action. I would first of all like to thank the First United Methodist Church under the leadership of Pastor Marty Suarez Horrell, and the church officers and trustees for the use of this beautiful sanctuary, along with your video equipment and your video manager, Randy Wilson. Pastor Marty, your hospitality in Christian spirit has been graciously appreciated. As president of our Oneonta Area chapter, I feel deeply honored to be connected to such a wonderful group of committed and dedicated people that sacrifice their time and talents in our fight for rights. Membership is vital. It's the lifeblood of our organization. And I want to thank everyone singly and individually and collectively for helping our organization go forward. But more importantly, making Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy live. You are most worthy of the cause. To all of our officers, committee members, chairs of committees and co-chairs, you are the heart and soul of our chapter. And I can't thank you enough for all that you do. You have, by your works, defined Dr. King's character, and this also empowers others. It goes on to say that we certainly cannot forget the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee and all the work that you had to do to put things together. The persons who were in charge were Dan Butterman and Rick Chrislett. They put many hours of planning, contacting speakers, musicians, trying to time recordings and scheduling, and plus so much more. No one knows how much it takes to put a program like this together. And I think of Regina Betts, who was our past vice president. She is no longer in this area, and how she used to organize this herself. The picture you see at the left here at Dr. King, this was drawn by her husband, her late husband, George, who was on the Legal Redress Committee. And I found out that this was done in the living room, on the living room floor in their house in Worcester. I'm not sure how long they could not use the living room for relaxation. I really want to thank all of the young people that took part in readings from Dr. King. You did what Dr. King told us to do. Put words into action, and you did just that. I want you to keep speaking out for civil rights. Last, we want to truly thank all of the participants in this year's celebration. What part you played, spoke, organized, sang, or your greatest contribution. Dr. King would have been 93 this year. He was 39 when he was assassinated in 1968, and Dr. King delivered his historic I Have a Dream speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963. To make his dream to become reality, we must join forces to fight for what is right. We have a long way to go, but we can get there. We can get to that mountaintop and overcome poverty, racism, war, and violence. We can do this together, but we have to do it with liberty and justice for all. We hope that this celebration will inspire us, not for just today, but for months to come. So welcome again. Come and join us, and we can get to that mountaintop.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far
My name is Shannon McHugh, and I serve the City of Oneonta as Chair of the Community Relations and Human Rights Commission. My role this evening for this incredible event is to introduce the City of Oneonta's newest mayor. Mark is a touchstone of our community, enhancing spaces through our Downtown Improvement Task Force, a founding chairman for First Night Oneonta, serving as community liaison for the Job Corps Academy, council member for our 8th Ward, and a direct community support, as you can often find him actively participating in many of our local events. Please join me as we welcome Oneonta's newest mayor, Mark Drenick.
I appreciate this opportunity. There have been a number of words that have been rolling around in my head the last several months, and I suspect that's true of most everybody here. Suppression. Suppression of the vote. Suppression of will. Suppression of humanity. Incitement. Incitement to say no. Incitement to stand up. Incitement to fight for your rights as a human on this earth. Involvement. Involvement in the moment. Involvement in the plan. Involvement in the organizing and action. Our democracy dangles on a thread. If we do not take action, we will be the people who let the dreams of 250 years kept alive with the blood of martyrs and heroes die of indifference. Fascism. Fascism is given opportunity by indifference. Fascism feeds on the bigotry of class, color, and creed. Fascism excretes lies and liars. Truth. Truth will win. Truth always wins. Truth is the way and the light, and it's the compass with which Martin Luther King put us on the path to the mountaintop. But we have a wide and deep chasm to cross. We will, for our democracy. And by the example of Dr. King, all of us, together, now. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished platform associates, fellow Americans. 3 years ago, the Supreme Court of this nation rendered in simple, eloquent, and unequivocal language a decision which will long be stenciled onto the mental sheets of our succeeding generations. For all men of goodwill, this May 17th decision came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of human captivity. It came as a great beacon light of hope to millions who've disinherited people throughout the world who had dared only to dream of freedom. Unfortunately, this noble and sublime decision has not gone without opposition. This opposition has often risen to ominous proportions. Many states have risen up in open defiance. The legislative halls of the South ring loud with such words as interposition and nullification. But even more, all types of conniving methods are still being used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. The denial of this sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic traditions. And so, our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote.
Give us the ballot and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot and we will no longer plead to the federal government for the passage of an anti-lynching law. We will by the power of our vote write the law on the statute books of the South and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence.
Give us the ballot and we will transform the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs into the calculated good deeds of orderly citizens.
Give us the ballot and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill and send to the sacred halls of the congressmen who will not sign a Southern manifesto because of their devotion to the manifesto of justice.
Give us the ballot and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and love mercy. And we will place at the head of the Southern states governors who have felt not only the tang of the human, but the glow of the divine. Give us the ballot, and we will quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision of May 17th, 1954.
First, there is a need for strong, aggressive leadership from the federal government. So far, only the judicial branch of the government has evinced this quality of leadership. If the executive and legislative branches of the government were as concerned about the protection of our citizenship rights as the federal courts have been, then the transition from a segregated to an integrated society would be indefinitely smoother. But we so often look to Washington in vain for this concern. In the midst of the tragic breakdown of law and order, the executive branch of the government is all too silent and apathetic. In the midst of the desperate need for civil rights legislation, the legislative branch of the government is all too stagnant and hypocritical. This dearth of positive leadership from the federal government is not confined to one particular political party. Both political parties have betrayed the cause of justice. The Democrats have betrayed it by capitulating to the prejudices and undemocratic practices of the Southern Dixiecrats. The Republicans have betrayed it by capitulating to the blatant hypocrisy of the right-wing and reactionary Northerners. These men so often have a high blood pressure of words and an anemia of deeds.
In the midst of these prevailing conditions, we come to Washington today pleading with the President and members of Congress to provide a strong, moral, and courageous leadership for a situation that cannot permanently be evaded. We come humbly to say to the men in the forefront of our government that the civil rights issue is not an ephemeral, evanescent domestic issue that can be kicked about by reactionary guardians of the status quo. It is rather an eternal moral issue which may well determine the destiny of our nation. In the ideological struggle with communism, the hour is late, the clock of destiny is ticking out, we must act now before it's too late.
A second area in which there is a need for strong leadership is from the Northern liberals. There is a dire need today for liberalism which is truly liberal. What we are witnessing today in so many northern communities is a sort of quasi-liberalism, which is based on the principle of looking sympathetically at all sides. It is a liberalism so bent on seeing all sides that it fails to become committed to either side. It is a liberalism that is so objectively and nautically that it is subjectively committed. It is a liberalism which is neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm. We call for liberalism from the North, which we can thoroughly committed to the ideal of racial justice and will not be deterred from the propaganda and subtle words and those who say, slow up for a while, you're pushing too fast.
A third source that we must look forward to for strong leadership is from the moderates of the White South. It is unfortunate that at this time, the leadership of the White South stems from the close-minded reactionary. These persons gain prominence and power by the dissemination of false ideas and by deliberately appealing to the deepest hate responding within the human mind.
It is my firm belief that this close-minded, reactionary, recalcitrant group constitutes a numerical minority. There are in the White South more open-minded moderates than appears on the surface. These persons are silent today because of fear of social, political, and economic reprisals. God grant that the white moderates of the South will rise up courageously, without fear, and take up leadership in this tense period of transition.
I cannot close without stressing the urgent need for strong, courageous, and intelligent leadership from the Negro community. We need a leadership that is 1957 calm and yet positive. This is no day for the rabble-rouser, whether he be Negro or white. We must realize that we are grappling with the most weighty social problem of this nation. And in grappling with such a complex problem, there is no place for misguided emotionalism. We must work passionately and unrelentingly for the goal of freedom. But we must be sure that our hands are clean in the struggle. We must never struggle with falsehood, hate, or malice. We must never become bitter. I know how we feel sometimes. There is the danger that those of us who have been forced so long to stand amid the tragic midnight of oppression, those of us who have been trampled over, those of us who have been kicked about, there is the danger that we will become bitter. But if we will become bitter and indulge in hate campaigns of the old, the new order which is emerging will be nothing but a duplication of the old order. We must meet hate with love. We must meet physical force with soul force. There is still a voice crying out through the vista of time saying, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them that despitefully use you. Then, and only then, can you matriculate into the university of eternal life. That same voice cries out in terms lifted to the cosmic proportions, he who lives by the sword perishes by the sword. And history is replete with the bleached bones of nations that failed to follow this command. We must follow nonviolence and love.
Hello, I'm Rory Smith, and I have been honored to serve as the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer at Hardwick College, and I'm honored to be here to speak with you today. You know, when I was preparing for my comments, I reflected on a letter the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote while he was describing getting the Voting Rights Act passed in the summer of 1965. The letter was published in an Atlantic magazine article, and it was entitled, "Let My People Vote." In that letter, he described how county by county and state by state, that they were systematically making efforts to suppress the vote of African Americans. You know, his words are as vital today as they were then. In our program today, we've been blessed to hear the words of Dr. King. Over 60 years ago, Dr. King told America, "Give us the ballot, and by will of our vote, we will pass laws to stop lynchings, end violence by white sheet hooded predators, transform bloodthirsty mobs into orderly citizens. We'd fill government with goodwill, justice, love, and mercy that is divine. The rights of all Americans and immigrants would be protected, including the socially economically depressed, those seeking health care, housing, quality education, beyond subsistence employment, and upward mobility." You see, when you give people of color the right to vote, we all benefit. Even corporations would benefit from increased ability on our part to participate in this consumer-driven economy. So I ask you, what benefit is the suppression of our votes? Is it the hiding from and denial of a history of genocide, enslavement, oppression, combined with the failure to make amends? Or is it the hubris that makes one want to be seen as superior to others? Dr. King told us that one of the most difficult lessons we have learned is that you cannot depend upon American institutions to function without pressure. Any real change in status quo depends on continued creative action to sharpen the conscience of our nation, and then to establish a climate in which even the most recalcitrant elements are forced to admit that change is necessary. Dr. King told us, "We know that Americans of goodwill have learned that no nation can continue to flourish or find its way to a better society while it allows any one of its citizens, let alone vast numbers, to be denied the right to participate in the most fundamental of all privileges of democracy, the right to vote." And in face of voter suppression today, Dr. King would tell us that voter disenfranchisement is the main instrument for perpetuating racial injustice. Dr. King wouldn't leave us there. He would encourage us to involve entire communities in a coordinated program of massive voter registration, political education, and community organization. When he says that, he is talking about you, and he's talking about me. He's talking about all Americans who seek justice. With a voice of warning, he would say, "There are surely difficult times ahead in the struggle to secure the rights of all Americans." When we hear his words from that time, we know that today, the struggle is even more imperative. That very day, the right to vote, and this very day, the right to vote is not just about civil rights of people of color, but it is about saving our democracy itself. And indeed, if he were here today, Dr. King would tell us not to grow weary, not to give up the struggle. And we would hear Mahalia Jackson call out, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." Because it is the dream of that better day that is worth working toward. And then he would touch our souls and remind us that we shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And then in his prophetic voice, he would tell us that although he might not get there with us, he has been to the mountaintop, and he has seen that we as a people will get to that promised land. And I believe today he would call out to us and to all those who stand in our way that our battle cry today is, let my people vote. Let my people vote. Let my people vote. Thank you.
Let's continue to live like Reggie and Dr. King. And let's leave this world a better place. Reggie fought the good fight, and he finished the race, and he always kept the faith. Reg, as you always recited in the last words of Dr. King's speech, and now you are free at last. Free at last. Good God Almighty, you are free home at last.
Go back with me, if you will. August 1963, the Mall, Washington, D.C. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who'd been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize an appalling condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come here today to cash this check, a check which will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the gradualizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors of opportunity for all of God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. But there's one thing I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. I'm not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from places where your quest for freedom have left you staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to Georgia, go back to the Carolinas, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that the state of Mississippi, a desert state sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression, will be transformed into a situation where little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places shall be made plain, and the crooked places shall be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith with which I return to the South. And with this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discord of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that someday we will be free. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And if America's to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous peaks of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
America, Are we standing true to our ideals? Have you heard, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America? Have we heard that? Are we living up to that? Have we heard? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all humans are created equal and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Are we living up to that? We hope that the songs that you have heard will draw you closer from the dream to Dr. Martin Luther King and America's reality. We hope that many of the words spoken today will not pass through like a fleeting moment, but you hear them and you remember them and you think what Dr. Martin Luther King lived through every day of his life, knowing that he and people that looked like him were disliked and hated, where large groups marching, the things that they had to endure every day, hit at close range with high-powered fire hoses, vicious dogs biting and snapping at their clothing and getting into the flesh. But even with all the problems, they didn't stop marching. They didn't stop protesting. They didn't stop boycotting and showing, but they did show more courage to keeping their eye on the prize. One of the powerful civil rights songs reads as such: I'm not going to let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I'm not going to let nobody turn me around. I'm going to keep on talking, keep on praying, marching to the freedom land. And remember the song, We Shall Overcome? What are they overcoming? Are we overcoming races of people over another race of people? No. The understanding is we overcome evil with good, and we overcome hate with love, ignorance with respect, and understanding, and false statements with the truth. And remember, the truth will set you free. So let us join together as one, and let's march on until victory is won.